Welcome to Season 5 of Fulfilling Career Happy Life. I'm your host, Randi Roberts, Executive and Career Life Coach. This season, we're exploring one of the most misunderstood capabilities in leadership, courage. Not the dramatic kind, but the everyday courage to step into discomfort, speak up when it matters, make hard calls, and lead forward even when the path isn't clear. You'll hear from executives and coaches sharing real moments that tested them and shaped their careers. My hope is that each conversation invites you to reflect on your own relationship with courage, where it's serving you, and where a braver step may be just ahead. So let's get started. My guest for our episode today is Cindy Harvey, and I've been really excited for this conversation because she's one of the people that I think of when I think of work around leadership courage. Cindy and I are colleagues. She's also a career coach, but her background's different than mine. Her background is in HR, in talent acquisition and strategy. And now she is a career and leadership coach and HR consultant. So there's, if it's a Venn diagram of the work that Cindy and I do, there's some crossover and some not crossover, which is thought-provoking for me to talk to Cindy. So Cindy, before I go on, let me ask you, can you explain to our listeners, what is the work that you do as a coach? What do you love to do?
Yeah, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on the show, Randi. I very much appreciate it. I'm excited about this conversation and a little bit of context about what I do and who I work with now. So you nailed it with my past career in HR and talent acquisition. Much of my time in my corporate days was spent in the tech sector.
Mm-hmm.
And so fast forward to today, the group that I love working with the most, probably because I am them and they are me, are what I would call high performers. And those are typically the top 15% of performers in an organization. And they are the ones that tend to be hard workers. They produce results. They work with excellence. They tend to put their head down and crank it out. And because of that, they can often become overlooked. They can often become stagnant and plateaued because they're so busy producing. And so that's where I come in. And I really work with them. And I think this will be part of our conversation today, Randi, is to really shift the way that they've been managing and thinking about their career such that they can redesign it in a way that works for them as opposed to them always working to serve their career. We want to flip that around and make sure that their career is serving them on their terms. So
That's
that's a
great.
little bit of what I do.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I like the way that you put that. And obviously that really does, I mean, the name of the show is Fulfilling Career Happy Life. So
Yes.
that's the dream, right? Is having
Yes,
building the career, succeeding within the thing that suits you at that time of your life. I love it.
exactly.
I love it.
Yes.
And the things that you talk about too, like obviously the theme of this season is leadership courage. And, I was sort of thinking about it like big, courageous decisions and things like that for our conversation today. You've brought in I'm going to call it micro, but it's not
Yep.
micro
Yep.
in terms of self-focus and how we
Yes.
make those kinds of courageous decisions. So I'm excited to explore both of those things with you.
Yes. Yes. Me too. Me too.
So let's start with your perspective on how often does courage or the absence of it come
Mm.
up in the work that you do with leaders?
Mm. I think that's a brilliant place to start. And I hadn't actually thought about it in the way that you just posed that question, Randi. And my immediate instinct answer is all the time. Is all the time. And to piggyback on the comment that you just made, I think that oftentimes when we think about courage and leadership, or maybe just courage in general, it is that, that bold action and the lion in the ring. And like it's some of those types of images, and definitely that's a flavor of courage. But when I think about the work that I do with clients, there's another layer or another perspective on it that to me can be even more impactful and can be position someone to have even greater influence. And impact and influence are often the combination of outcomes that folks that I work with want. And so,
Wait, hang on one second. I just want to think on that for a moment.
yes.
Impact and influence. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
love that distillation of that. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, of course. Of course. So to me, like the other flavor of courage when it comes to leadership is having the courage or being brave enough to look at yourself and to look at yourself from the perspective of what are my defaults? I talk a lot about habits. What are some of those hidden habits that I have all the time around how I deal with conflict, how I feel about visibility, how I feel about taking up space, how I feel about, asking for what I advocating on my own behalf. Like all of those things, they're rooted in a series of habits. And I think that the habits that I see with clients I work with, and I think leaders in general, are oftentimes ones that have created success for them until they get to a point where it's no longer serving them and they don't know what to do. So
I have that
that's how I think
conversation
about
a
it.
lot. I have,
Yep.
yeah, because you and I both work with people who are successful, who have already
Yes.
achieved a lot. And,
Yes.
what's the saying? What got you here may not get you there. And maybe
Yes.
that's where courage comes in, is in that pivot.
Yes. 100%. Yeah. 100%.
Interesting. So, if there are trends, where do you see leaders most struggling to act courageously?
Hmm. I think it's in the season of that pivot where they know that something's not working, right? They know something's not working. They've been trying to do the same thing. They still have ambitions, obviously, and they want to achieve, whatever it is that they have their eye on next. And they're trying to do the same things of working hard, putting their head down, producing more results, taking on more and taking on bigger. But it just stops working. I often say it's often around like the 10 to 15 year mark of someone's career. After they've produced results, they have a solid resume, they have credibility, they've got that street cred already, solid enough that it's no longer about producing more and bigger results, right? So they need new tools.
Hmm.
And I think one of those bag of tools that they can refer to is really that lens of self-leadership. And to your point, everything that I did, is me speaking as a leader up until this point, worked and created success and made me money. It gave me the title. I got promoted. Opportunities landed in my lap without me trying, so to speak.
Hmm.
And they can't quite figure out what to do different. They just know that it's not working and they become frustrated and discouraged and all of, the spiral starts to happen. But I think it's in that moment where the challenge or they start looking for support and help and answers.
This is such a juicy conversation, and it's thought-provoking for me, and I know it will be for our listeners also. Because
Hmm.
one of the conversations that I know I have, and I'm sure you have as a coach very often with clients, is around on the topic of courage. What what data do we have that shows yes, you are capable of taking that courageous act? What
Hmm.
have you done that has, and by looking within, looking at the things they've applied to themselves that may not be those big, bold stands, but can help build that skill and build the confidence we need maybe to take the courageous act. So I
Hmm.
think it's really important to break it down that way. I love this.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
When you are coaching someone around courage, and you said it comes up so often, so whether or not they show up wanting to talk about courage, it's there. It is for me and my clients too. Do when they're trying to take it on and build a new skill and whatever, do you have a process that you take them through or a sort of a mental framework at all? Like how do you approach it and how do you move through it?
Hmm. I do. I do have a process that I take them through, and the way that I position. I had a conversation just this morning with a client, and the way that I position it is, at least in my work and my version of helping someone transition or transform through this process, is I think also because of my background in HR and talent acquisition, I understand how careers work internally in a corporate environment. And so the way I tend to think about it and position it is I use the lens of work to help someone understand themselves. And so from a process perspective, I'll tell you the very first thing that I would do with a client is a tool that I created, and it's simply a look back and looking back at milestone events in their career and milestone events in their life as well, and using those milestones as a way to inform how they make choices and decisions, from what place, from what motivators, and what life events may have influenced their choices and decisions and become, again, habit for
Hmm.
them. Right. So that's the very first thing that we do is looking back and having that be the foundation to inform. So how did you get to this place, right? Where you now are stuck on a plateau or you're trying to take on more work and to get that impact and visibility and influence that you actually want, and it's not materializing. How did you, whether you love it or you don't, you created this, right? You created this through a series of choices and decisions that you've made over 20 years of your career and your life, but those choices and decisions are quite invisible to them, I would say. That's where it starts.
It's everything you're bringing up is like leading me down so many trails because it's so, you know, I think people that are listening to this will recognize themselves in it, whether or not they've ever thought, oh, th this courage thing is hard for me. I need to think more about this. It's
Mhm.
so interesting. Did you develop that along the way based on, sort of instinctive work with clients and recognizing it was helpful? Was that something you knew from your HR and talent acquisition days that you brought to it? Like, how did you come to that?
Hmm. That's a great question. I don't know if I've actually really thought about it. So let's figure it out in the moment together. My instinct answer is probably a combination of the two. I would say, like, even in my corporate days, I was involved with building career, what we call talent management, but career development programs for high performers. Most of my work in that phase of my career was with sales professionals. And so I've built these kinds of programs in the past, but my version of it is really based on understanding the different lenses and the different ways of understanding yourself. So that choices and decisions being one factor, your values being a second factor,
Yep.
right? Another one for me personally around career management is what kind of role do you want? You know, I think people tend to get stuck in a decision of should I stay or should I go? But it's all of the pieces that make up who you are, not just as a professional, but who you are as a human, as a person. Because those two lanes really do intersect. How you show up at work is how you show up in life, and how you show up in life is
Yes.
how you show up at work. So
Yes.
I would say it's really a soup of both of those sides of my experience, and from working with as many clients as I have through this process, I think it all of these pieces serve a purpose and inform their decision.
Yeah.
And maybe another way of saying it. It's all about their identity, right? So what are the different components of a person's identity? Values, for example, being one.
Hmm.
And so it's the combination of those things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It
Mhm.
brings up another question in terms of, that internal narrative or the internal self-perception, perhaps. And I wonder about what mindset shifts leaders need to make in order to really be that, courageous leader. And what's your reaction? I mean, obviously, I have some thoughts on it, but what's your reaction to
Mhm.
that? What kind of mindset shifts do you think they need to make? Do you work on them with?
Hmm. Yeah, so I have a particular client in mind, and I can give you an example that that I think will maybe paint some color around this. So this client that I was working with was an individual contributor, but in a very senior role that had
Hmm.
company-wide impact.
Okay.
And so one of the, as I mentioned a moment ago, one of the tools or steps in the process that we worked through was around her values. And one of the values, there's a exercise that I take them through for them to define, for them to identify and define their values. And so this client, we've talked about this publicly many times, so I'm not spilling any tea here. So this
Well, we're not
particular,
using their names, so.
we're not using names anyways, but this particular client, one of the values that came up on her list was prestige.
In
And
terms of something that's important to her. Okay,
exactly,
got
yes.
it.
And so when she saw that on her list, she said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. She rejected this term prestige because it felt like she was putting herself on a pedestal over other people. And culturally, for her, in her upbringing, and culturally as well, it's a very kind of community-oriented way of thinking and a way of approaching things. And so there was a definite conflict between how she perceived herself and a value that she had adopted versus one that she actually, as a mature adult, believed in and actually needed for her to have that satisfaction, not just professionally, but personally as well. So I think from a mindset shift perspective, it's understanding that sometimes we, again, these things are hidden.
Yeah.
Sometimes we adopt things and ways of thinking and beliefs and habits and examples from family, from, our, for me, one influential person in my life and career was the first boss that I had, and how that person helped to saw things in me that I didn't even see in myself, right? So it's understanding that some of those, let's say, values that we live every single day are not values that are ours. They're values that we have adopted from other sources and we use them, but it also creates a lot of friction, I think, because it doesn't quite fit. It doesn't quite fit. So it's, I think, also being open to seeing that side of the story,
Hmm.
and speaking about courage, then having the courage to realize you're working from an identity or from a place professionally and personally that you've outgrown, that doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting in so many ways. It's about, and you and I are chatting before, so I'm not sure if this was on the recording or before, but it's about what fits you in that season of your life, and many of
Mhm.
these things we outgrow.
Yes.
And one of the dynamics of that I find so interesting is how much of this goes back to how we were raised and what happened to us at very, when we were at sort of imprintable time in our young life and how we hang on to things that just really may not fit us anymore or may not serve
Mhm.
us anyway. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
interesting. So that's where we tip over into being a work psychologist, I think.
Yeah, slash
Yeah.
therapist, slash
Yeah.
counselor, slash.
Exactly. Exactly. One final area that I'd love to explore a little bit, Cindy, is thinking about being a courageous leader. What if something happens so that our courage takes a hit? Like we have these experiences that leave a mark, that leave a bruise, that change us somehow. Have
Mhm.
you worked through that with clients and sort of how they find their footing again?
Yeah, I work through that with clients all the time, every day, literally. And from a professional standpoint, it's when, for example, someone loses their job and their whole
Yeah.
identity, right, is wrapped up. And that's not, I think that's for many of us, like our work plays such a critical role, especially for someone who's a high performer and used to creating success through their career. And when that is taken away through someone else's decision, right, that can, it's almost a form of trauma, I think. It can be because it really shakes not just your day-to-day routine of getting up and logging in and going to a meeting and all, like that is completely thrown off. And it also, I think, shifts your identity because you no longer know how you're going to operate in this world and how you're going to, your esteem, your self-esteem is caught up in that. Your lifestyle is caught up in that. So it hits a number of different, pretty personal places, I would say, when someone goes through that. And part of my coaching to someone who's in that kind of career transition can be, I actually had this conversation just yesterday with someone, and part of my coaching to them is don't make it mean more than it means, right? It's a moment in time. It's a slice of a much bigger story, a much, much more colorful mosaic of who you are as a person, and a professional. In a matter of hopefully months, when they land their next role, like this will be a nothing in their mind. In the moment, it doesn't seem like that. So I try to give them that perspective
Yeah.
that it's not a forever thing. It's a season. It's a moment. We're going to learn how to navigate and learn how to grow through it. And on the other side, there's some really cool stuff waiting for them.
That's great. It's great. It's interesting because while you were saying that, I was thinking about that, like a job loss, which seems like a very tangible thing, but it really does go to, it shakes our sense of control. It
Yeah.
shakes our sense of security. Like this, someone else made this decision that really shakes our foundation, self-identity, your sense of value. Like all
Yes.
of these things that happen make us play small.
Yes.
And that's one specific example, and I do think it's trauma. Other things
Hmm.
can happen that result in that make us play small. And then, the work that I often will do with clients in those situations is to get them to envision how they do want to show up. And at
Hmm.
some future point in time, if it's 3 months or 6 months or whatever that is, who do they want to be and how they, and it's not just get over the experience.
Hmm.
It's how do you use that deep, meaningful experience to become the next version so that can serve you and it's
Hmm.
not pain for no gain,
Yes.
something like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Yes.
Really, really interesting. Thank you so much. Cindy, if I'm sure that our listeners are going to be really, you're stimulating a lot of thought for me and for them. How can they find you? How can they follow what you write and that kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to share that. So I'm on LinkedIn. I play on LinkedIn. And so just look me up, Cindy Harvey, and feel free to connect with me there. And the other thing I can offer is I have a pretty simple self-assessment. It's called Decoded: 7 Habits That Keep High Performers from Getting Ahead. And so anybody who's interested or found some spark in this conversation is welcome to download that at cindyharveyonline/habits.
Great. And I'll make sure we put those links into the show notes. It's interesting because what I do when I have these conversations, I sort of take some notes throughout, and some of the things that really stand out for me about our conversation, I really love that discussion we had around your words were season of pivot,
Mm,
where we recognize that something's not working the way we need it to, not serving us to get where we want to go. We need new tools. And that is a time when we need courage, and we don't define it that way.
yeah.
So I
Hmm.
really, really love that. And the whole discussion we had around, mindset shifts and how much our values come into it. And it goes to the theme that we talked about of bringing our whole selves to our work. And
Yes.
that's how we find fulfillment
Hmm.
in our career. So I'm so grateful for our conversation today. And thanks for making the time to join me, Cindy.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Randy.
Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.